All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Wes Purvis. As Keith already pointed out, I work for Cisco. I'm a technical marketing engineer in the wireless group. I used to work out of Ohio, but I moved from Ohio and now work remotely in New Jersey. So I want to talk about, or ask the question, does it actually matter what AP you buy? There's a number of APs out there. Some of them are, very small. Some of them are big, heavy. So it doesn't matter. So the point of this presentation is it's not meant to be like sales oriented or, buy one vendor or another vendor. It's like, does it matter the AP you buy? Does it matter if you buy, a low-end AP? Does it matter if it's 11N? Do you need the latest and greatest? That's kind of the point. I try to stay away from anything sales, and hopefully I don't go down that path. So let's get into it. So vendors make a lot of APs. Does anybody want to venture a guess of how many APs Cisco has made in the last 10 years, 15 years?
Which product line?
Aeronet access points.
Does Meraki count?
Anybody have a guess? 75? The number is 90, give or take. All right, so about 90 APs, all told. This is a wall that we used to have in Ohio that now got torn down because remodeled, but it'll get put back up. Basically with all the different models of access points that we've made, and there's just a lot of them, right? You have so many different generations of APs, indoor APs, different variations of different models. It's, just mind-boggling how many APs that there are. So, how do you know what to buy? So most vendors have some sort of portfolio, right, where they have multiple different types of APs. One type is you have a good AP. It's never going to be a bad AP. It's always going to be a good AP. So you have a good AP, then you have a better AP, and then you have the best AP. Cisco used to have this. Now we've kind of gone to like a good, a more good, a better, and a best. Some vendors even take it a step further, and you have like a good, a more good, a better, a more better, and a best. So it's the idea being, you buy the access point that fits your budget and fits your requirements essentially. So that's kind of what I'm going to go through. So I'm trying to think to myself, does it matter, how can you quantify what type of AP you should buy? One way is, kind of if you look at performance. So I think that's kind of the natural place to start. I think once people argue once you get out in the real world, performance is, goes right out the window. But hey, I have a lab in Ohio, so let me use that lab. And let's do some lab tests that I did. So this is all kind of, I tested different vendors, so it's all going to be kind of anonymized, and I'm not trying to beat up on anybody or show off anybody, so to speak. So here's one vendor. I tested an 11N MacBook. Right, so this is an older MacBook, and comparing different generations of access points. So on the far right, we have an 11N first generation access point. So these are the the APs that came out in like 2007, 2008, 2009, that kind of time frame. And so most of those access points are 2 spatial stream, and the 11N MacBook is 3 spatial stream, right? So we're getting about a little bit lower performance when we compare to the 11N G2, which were 3 spatial stream access points, right? So that's kind of getting into the modern era of access points. And then we have 11AC Wave 1 and 11AC Wave 2. A little bit of a difference, right? Now let's look at another vendor. So they kind of show the same thing. All the performance is relative. Just look at the gains that you get between generations. interesting to see that there is such a difference, right, between generations of access points. You might not really think that, I guess. But the answer is, the question is why? Well, each generation of access point has hopefully improved upon the previous generation. Here's an AP that Cisco made, more than 10 years ago, right? It's 1000 series. Anybody remember these? Anybody still using these? Compare that to, this is, one of Cisco's latest 802.11ac Wave 2 access points. This thing is like 10 times faster at least, than that AP and in a smaller form factor. So, generation over generation, we have better radios. That's kind of like, we see this with every new generation of chipsets. There's, even with the same client, you have slight improvement. So looking at, there shouldn't be any difference in performance, for those, for the 11N access points and the 11AC access points, right? Because the client is the same. It's still an 11N access point. But there was an improvement. So we have better radios. They're just better at doing Wi-Fi. We have better CPUs. So there's more processing power. So we can handle, more clients. We can handle more packets per second. We have better antennas. Antenna design has been, refined and, become more specialized to working for Wi-Fi use cases. And hopefully that all leads to a better AP. So let's look at, this is not, I have a typo on the slide. This should be performance across different levels of APs, right? So these are all, if I could read my slide. So this is using those same APs that I showed on the previous slide, but testing in a multi-client scenario. So 40 clients on a radio, you're getting up there in client count. It's not a lot by any means, but it's maybe something typically that you could see in your deployments. So if we look at the 11N 11N AP, this thing, it's basically half the performance of an 11AC Wave 2 access point. I should point out that I'm using 11AC clients, right? So they're all Wave 1. No, I don't have any multi-user MIMO capable clients. And I tested on a 20 megahertz channel just to kind of keep things as apples to apples. So avoiding, showing an 80 megahertz number when, the 11N access points cannot do that. So it's just, to me, interesting to see that there is actually a benefit there is such a large increase in performance, especially, looking at the 11N access points. And again, that's all because of, the CPUs, the antennas, better radios, all that stuff plays into why there's a performance increase. So keep in mind, this is lab testing. Conditions are pretty good. The lab's in the middle of Ohio. There's no outside interference source. We have some neighbors, but we gave them, we provide the Wi-Fi for them so we can keep them off our channels. A funny story, one of our neighbors come in one day and I see three new SSIDs, one in Uni 1, 80 megahertz, one in Uni 3, 80 megahertz, and another one in 2.4, 40 megahertz. They had gone out and bought one of those consumer tri-band routers. So got that and I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. Fortunately, they were receptive to us providing them Wi-Fi, saying, hey, you can keep it, it's unlicensed space, but we're also testing on here, so your Wi-Fi is not going to work very well. Why don't you help us help you? So how about comparing different types of APs? So the low-end AP and the high-end AP, right? So if we compare, the very small, cheap-looking AP and the very expensive-looking, heavy one that could probably hurt you if it fell on you, kind of AP. So we have 100 client tests, 100 laptops set up, and they're a mixture of 11N and 11AC clients, laptops, tablets, all sorts, a mixture of different clients set up in every which way to kind of simulate some sort of real world environment. So just looking at, again, two different vendors, comparing low-end AP to a medium range AP and to a high-end AP. So what is the performance? So it looks like, it turns out the performance is actually pretty similar between the low end and the mid-range, but then the high end, you usually have some sort of advantage, which when I, seeing these results, from Cisco, I'm like, phew, this is glad these results panned out because, there is some sort of value in that higher end AP. Whether you need it, that's a question for you to answer, but there is that value. But the performance is only one part of the equation. Another part is can the AP actually handle the load? So this is a ping utility of a low end AP, and look in the red box. It shows that the left column is the successful pings, the right column is the failed pings, and it's like a 2-to-1 failed ping to successful ping. And this is something that we see a lot with lower end APs, that they can handle the connection, like you can connect 100 clients or 200 clients, but they can't actually serve all those clients simultaneously. And it's usually a hardware limitation, the way the encryption's handled. So it's just the low-end APs, giving good performance, but there's a limit, right? Once you get to a certain scale, that low-end AP is not going to serve you very well. Now, what about the RF? Being from Ohio, working from Ohio, wouldn't be a presentation without talking about RF. So I want to talk a little bit about the benefits that you get from having more transmitters, more receivers. So different APs have different transmitters, different receivers, right? The low-end APs are usually 2x2. High-end APs are usually 4x4 these days with Wave 2 APs. And that's, so 4 being, 4 transmitter by 4 receivers, and then the colon is the spatial streams. So there's really 2 advantages that you get from having more transmitters. So one is MRC, right? So this is basically using your antennas to combine the signals that you receive and have, to get a better signal. And so the thing here, the more antennas that you have receiving, the more MRC that you can do, and the better, the better the received signal will be, more robust. And then the flip side of that is beamforming. So this is basically aligning the phases of the different transmitters to maximize the signal at the client. And this is something that basically every access point can do now, whether it's standards-based or implicit. Basically every AP can do it. So what is, how can you think about it? So think about beamforming as like a slice of Swiss cheese. There's going to be some holes. You're going to have areas where you have high signal and areas where you have low signal. And the beamforming will just change the orientation of that slice of cheese to change where the holes are. Basically, you're trying to create constructive interference. So it's like you're in a pool or you're in the ocean and 2 waves come together. That's when that's constructive interference. But the gotcha here is you need an extra transmitter to be able to beamform effectively. And I have some data that coming up that shows that it's difficult to beamform when you have the same number of transmitters as the client. So first example. So here's some testing that we did a little while ago with the AP3700, comparing the AP3700 in 4x4 mode versus 3x3 mode. And it was surprising to see the difference in results. So there's about a 10% at 10% difference in throughput at 100 clients. It's about 3% at 10 clients, just from enabling a second, just by enabling that fourth antenna. So drastic difference. And why? So in this 100 client test, the client breakdown is about a third 3 spatial stream and 2/3 2 spatial streams. So with 4x4, there was a lower retry rate, about 3% lower. But also in the uplink direction, 4x4 was able to maintain 3 spatial streams a lot more. So basically in the 3x3 operating mode, the AP only received about 5% of the frames were 3 spatial streams. In 4x4 mode, nearly half the frames, or over half the frames, were 3 spatial streams. Second test that we did was looking at beamforming with a 3 spatial stream client. So we have a cubicle environment in the Ohio lab. Took data in 41 locations and looked at data rate and RSSI. And this is what we found. So in 3x3 mode, nearly half the time the AP was negotiating MCS7, so basically 11N rate. And with 4x4, the AP most of the time, 85% of the time, was able to negotiate M9. So the heat map is, the red is MCS9, the orange is MCS8, and the blue is MCS7. So again, just by having that additional transmitter. So most of the industry has gone to 4x4 on the high end. And so, assuming you're using beamforming, you can expect kind of similar gains. So just kind of an interesting point to look at. So to wrap it up on the 4x4 findings, to put some numbers behind it. So with beamforming, we saw about a 2.5 dB gain. That was to a 3 spatial stream client. The gain would be even higher to a 2 spatial stream or a 1 spatial stream client. And then in the uplink direction with MRC, we saw about an average of 1 dB of gain in the uplink direction. And then in the multi-client test, we saw about a 10%, that equated to about a 10% improvement in performance. So a couple notes on MRC and beamforming. So having more antennas, right? So having 4 antennas versus 2 antennas on this guy, it gives you more degrees of freedom. So if you're transmitting to a 2 spatial stream or a 3 spatial stream client, you're using those 2 or 3 antennas to transmit, and then you can use an extra antenna to beamform or do whatever you like with to increase the signal to the client. But you really do need that extra transmitter, as shown by the 3x3 and 4x4 data. So most vendors have gone to 4x4, which is good to see, for client performance. So if you're in a situation, an environment where you need the best performance to the client, whether it's a challenging RF environment or something like that, a 4x4 AP, beyond the performance gains, the throughput gains, are going to offer more robust RF, if you will. As far as beamforming goes, clients must support it. So most of the 11 AC clients do support it. By support, I mean they actually use it in practice. They respond to beamforming feedback requests. Now, how good that feedback is another discussion, but they do support it, which is a big step from an 11N where basically nobody implemented it. Another thing to keep in mind with the number of transmitters is the number of transmitters affects the total transmit power of the access point. So in Cisco land, our indoor access points have a transmit power of 17 dBm per path. So on our high-end AP where we have 4x4, that equates to 23 dBm of total power. However, that same 17 dBm per path on a 2x2 AP comes out to be 20 dBm, right? So slightly lower transient power. So just another thing to keep in mind. If you ever want to calculate total power, here's the formula. Now PoE, previous session touched on PoE quite a bit, but basically the newer APs, need more power. That's the way the industry is going, and it's the way it's going to continue to go. So this, this 2x2 AP can operate, full functionality on 802.3 AF. However, this 4x4 AP cannot, right? It needs AT power. It even needs more than AT power if you, use a module or if you use USB. So many customers, this has been a requirement, since 11AC. So we're a little bit far along in the transition process of going from .3AF to .3AT, but it's a transition, and it's something to keep in mind as you're deploying your access points. Like, do you actually need to upgrade your switch network? Because that can be even more costly than just upgrading access points. Size and weight. Really, this should be even, so it comes out, it's a little over 5 of these to equal 1 of these in terms of weight. But the size and weight, there are use cases, believe it or not, for heavy APs. If you're deployed in tough conditions, where the AP is going to take a lot of abuse, right? This thing has a metal back, and don't mind that. So it's it can take a lot more abuse than this AP, which is almost all plastic. This thing's not sealed. This one's sealed. So different types of APs give different types of have different types of size and weight. Now, different types of APs as well. So part of those 90 APs that Cisco makes, there's all sorts of different niche APs, right? And every vendor has different types of APs. And so that can come into play as well. Are you deploying in a dorm? So do you need extra Ethernet ports? If so, a wall plate AP might be up your alley. Are you deploying outside where you need extended temperatures, or you need higher transient power for, say, a point-to-point bridge? If so, an outdoor access point. Are you deploying in a high-density scenario where you need perfect control over the RF? If so, an external antenna, an AP with external antennas might be up your alley. So what's the bottom line? Know your requirements. I think that there are differences between the APs in terms of how they perform, their size, the requirements on the wired network. Don't forget about the RF. Don't assume that all different models of APs are created equally. And then ultimately, it's up to you to decide which AP is best for you. And that's all I have. Thank you.